Hello and welcome back everybody to a brand new episode on the channel of r/ProRevenge. My name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do, however, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button, as well as make sure you got notifications turned on, that way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. Our first story of the evening comes to us from Log Leader, and it's called Made My Ex-Boss Lose $25,000 on His Salary. I used to work at Wendy's as a manager. It was already a crappy job, but my general manager was nice and most employees were easy to deal with. All of this started when I was already working 65 hours a week, and I was offered a $100 bonus to work one of my only days off. I decided to do it, and later that week, before I had even been paid, I was asked to come in again. I said that this time I'd like $150, as at this point I had worked almost 23 days without a single day off. They said they'd do it, so I went in. Cut forward 3 weeks. I've been asking about my money for a while now, and I'm told by my general manager that I could speak to the district manager, as he would be in later that night. The conversation goes like this. Hey, do you know what's going on with the bonus? I'm owed $250 with both the days. Well, that's why I came here. The store's been having trouble making money. So basically, he's telling me my performance isn't good enough. At this point, I'm working dinner rush and the whole night with me and 3 others. My girlfriend, best friend, and other friend that's grown close. Your shift isn't making as much money as others, and your drive time is higher. Well, we're doing all we can. It takes extra time when we only have half the number of people with the same amount of customers. That's really no excuse. When am I going to receive my bonus? My DM was a very sheepish man, so he is very obviously scared when he tells me this. We, can't give you a bonus until the revenue rises and the drive time goes down. I'm speechless at this point. The rest of the conversation was a blur. I grew up on the south side. You don't mess with people's money. A day passes. I've had time to collect myself and speak to my entire crew. Everyone agrees to walk out with me, so I call the district manager. The phone starts to ring, but then it cuts off. He declined my call. So I called him again, and again and again. Finally, I just leave him a voicemail. Look, Jacob, you need to talk to me. You have until 8:45 to call me back, or all of night crew is done. At this point, it's 7:30. I go into my office and start watching my boss's email. She leaves it open and logged in. I figured he would probably email her before calling me. About 20 minutes of watching this email, and boom! An email pops up. Emergency, Lonnie. This idiot put my name in the email, so of course I read it. Long story short, the email was him trying to make sure my general manager was going to be ready to go to work, aka he wasn't going to call me or give me my money. So I get all my people together and we walk out, leaving everything out. All the meat, all the toppings, the fryer, everything. The next day, I turn in my keys. About a week later, I'm called by my brother. What's up? Jacob lost all of his stores. He has to go back to Indiana. My brother worked at that store as well. If you don't know, district manager pay is based on the amount of stores they have and how much they make. When he moved to Indiana, his wages got reduced for $65,000 to around $40,000. All this over $250. Our next story by T. Crambo is called Owners Didn't Want to Give Me What I Deserved. Now they're about to lose a $3 million contract because I resigned. I apologize for the length of this, but I finally stuck it to my bosses and I couldn't be happier. I'm a young project manager for an unlimited commercial GC. I picked up a hammer for the first time 6 years ago with no prior experience. I was raised believing if you work hard and you apply yourself, you'll be successful. For 2 years, I learned everything that I could in the construction industry. Took my work home with me and studied on my own time to better myself. For that, I was promoted to foreman. I was brought in to take over a small project at a 12-building, 120-unit condo complex. It started small, and the board of directors for the HOA told me they loved my professionalism, work ethic, and ability to complete projects on time and under budget. We won a big contract because of that small project. That was 3 years ago. I've since taken over for the job of foreman, superintendent, and project manager. I do the billing, meetings with engineers and board members, scheduling, takeoff, material ordering. I even train the subs on application of new products because we didn't have enough mid-management. The project just passed $2.7 million. We got a bid request for another $3 million job in the same complex. All the while, the board of directors telling me how they appreciate me and how they've gone through 5 different contractors in the years before committing to my company because of how my management and quality of work was. This boosted my confidence, and I went to the owners asking for the raise they promised me 1 year ago for my production. They told me, "The experience you're gaining is far more valuable." I said, "You're right." I put my resume on public, got contracted by a headhunter, just accepted an offer this week for an $80K a year salary, full benefits, 28 days paid time off including holidays, in the office now, no more working from the fields, full in my own truck, laptop, Wi-Fi in my truck for on-the-go billing when I visit out-of-state projects, $80 per diem, 100% matching 401k for the first 3 years of my employment, quarterly bonus programs. The company I'm with now only pays me $40K, and that's it. None of the above listed benefits. The final nail in the coffin was when the owners bragged about how much my project made in a company meeting and then denied me a Christmas bonus. I laid this offer on their desk Friday and watched their jaws hit the floor. I told the HOA board presidents of the project I'm running and my resignation when they couldn't match my offer. His eyes got big and requested a meeting with the owners and expressed serious concern about moving forward with the new project without my involvement. They don't have anyone to replace me, and I'm not gonna lie, it feels good to hurt their pockets when I gave them everything I had for 6 years and only asked for the median project manager salary. Fuck those greedy bastards. Now, our final and longest story of the evening by Switch SCE to Ox. Screw me out of my bonus, make me do 2 job, enjoy the backwater you earned. I apologize for the length of this in advance. This happened some years ago, but still seems relevant today, so I thought I would share the story. So, back in the 90s, I was working for a European-based financial firm. U.S. offices were managed by Europeans with regional head office in New York. Younger employees were generally underpaid/overworked, as in your first few years out of college, the promised reward was being promoted to a director position where the salary, perks, and bonus structure would really kick in. Kinda like how law firms promote their younger lawyers to partners after a long wait. As junior associates, the only good news we received was the same 5 weeks of vacation per year, plus a few weeks of sick leave. Same as our European counterparts, which for me meant a lot of camping and staying cautious during the summer since I didn't really make enough to travel to exotic or expensive locations. The offices were set up in a way where the business development, BD directors, each had a junior associate. The BD guys would generally work network, schmooze, and travel around their territories to meet clients and new prospects. Once back in the office, the BD guys would dump their meeting notes on the desks of the junior associates to follow up and land the business, aka a hunter-skinner model. As a junior associate, I was pretty busy assisting a BD, so I routinely rolled over at least 2 weeks of vacation every year. I had worked at the firm for 3 years and was starting to get antsy for a promotion. Right after Thanksgiving, my boss in the West Coast office told me I was being transferred and promoted to the Southeast office come the new year. I really had no interest working in or living in the Southeast, but I wanted to advance my career. I rolled over my usual 2 weeks of vacation into the next year, so I was eligible for 7 weeks of vacation that next year. After celebrating New Year's with my family in California, I packed my car and drove across the country. Once in the new office, I settled in and met my new boss, who promptly informed me that he wasn't actually promoting me to director, though I was being given the responsibilities of the role, as he judged me to be too young, but was also told that if I demonstrated that I could do the job, I would be promoted next year. I was pissed, but didn't have a choice other than moving back home and starting from scratch. so I agreed to it. I disliked my new boss instantly as coworkers told me he was flaunting his management perks, which consisted of large allowances for housing and automobiles which were paid for by the sales production from employees like myself. As it turns out, he was related to a serving member of the board of directors back in Europe, which is how he got the job as a regional manager. Everyone knew he didn't have the skills to do our job, so he just collected fat checks, went to expensive restaurants with friends, and billed it to the company as client development, all the while leasing a new Mercedes every 2 years on the company's dime while generally being a dick to everyone who worked for him. During the first week, I also met my junior associate, Jeremy. We sat down and discussed some accounts that I'd inherited while we were in backwater locations. None of the other directors wanted to visit. Jeremy was my professional, but I got the distinct impression Jeremy hated me, though I didn't know why. I started traveling around to meet my clients and prospects over the next few weeks, usually spending at least 3 or 4 days on the road back in the office on Fridays to go over follow-ups on business leads with Jeremy and execute whatever paperwork needed to be taken care of. About a month later, I returned from one of my trips and learned that Jeremy had quit. It turned out that he was mad that he'd been passed over for the position I'd been given. I couldn't fault him, as I probably would have done the same thing. I asked my manager to hire someone else to back me up, but he was hesitant to do so, reasoning that my client portfolio was just starting out so I could do both roles until it made sense to staff up. I pointed out that it would be hard to be an effective business development officer if I had no support system to help grow my client portfolio, but he chose not to listen, knowing that I had little recourse but to shut the hell up. I spent the rest of the year working my ass off. This was right before email and internet were common, so executing business on the road was hard. Fax machines were the bane of my existence. Even though laptops were reserved for directors, my boss was kind enough, heavy sarcasm, to let me use a company laptop, which I would handle all of the paperwork to process client business from hotel business centers late at night or early in the morning. So I learned to live off of 5 hours of sleep, or to sleep on planes whenever I could. After dealing with problems from some irate clients, I eventually paid for my own personal cell phone. Not everyone had them in the mid-90s, and our directors had just started getting company-paid phones that year. As I had to handle customers from the road, I just gave my personal cell number for clients to call so I could handle problems from the road. I landed a few big clients by a combination of luck and hard work and got some solid referrals, which led to more referrals, so within a few months I was gaining some serious momentum. Since I didn't have an associate to help me, that meant I spent the weekends and late nights back at the office handling paperwork, then back on the road during the week. I was so busy working both sides of the job that by December of that year, I hadn't taken my mandatory 2 weeks of vacation. I had some new clients that needed to be handled by year end, so I was granted a vacation waiver, meaning that my 7 weeks of vacation would roll over into the next year, adding up to 12 weeks of vacation plus sick time for the coming year. It was a big hassle for HR to process the waiver, but since I had produced a lot of new business, my manager was all too happy to order it done. I wasn't upset about working through year end, though I flew back and forth to California for Christmas on a 24-hour turnaround. I rationalized it, hoping that I would get paid the first big bonus of my career in a few months. At that time, European firms paid their bonuses in mid-April, while the employees of US-based firms got their bonuses by the end of January. If you were planning on switching jobs early in the new year, working at a European firm meant that sometimes you left money on the table, aka golden handcuffs, so the timing of switching firms was very important. I continued to work at a frantic pace through April, taking no vacation as I was bringing in more and more clients and digging myself out of paperwork when I wasn't on the road. In the new year, we had some meetings about scorecards and sales goals, and I led my office in some of the categories and was number 1 for overall production. Finally, in mid-April, my boss calls me in and announced it was time to discuss my bonus/annual review. I eagerly sat down, licking my chops because I was assuming my bonus would be equal to my base salary, at least, if not double. He handed me a piece of paper, and it showed a number that was almost 90% less than what I was expecting for my bonus. I literally laughed out loud and told him it was a little late for an April Fool's joke, but he wasn't smiling. He proceeded to tell me how proud he was of me, that since I wasn't a director, the bonus I received was the maximum amount he would give me, as there wasn't any more money in the budget. I sat there in shock for a while, and then kept asking the same question in different ways. Basically, why did he screw me on my bonus? It was like talking to a brick wall. Despite pointing to the scorecard that showed me as the best producer in the office, all the while having no junior associate, he wasn't having it. I was crushed, but then asked him if he was promoting me to director since I had demonstrated I could produce, hoping the title would be a gateway into the big payday. The following year, he shook his head and replied, "Maybe next year if you prove this year wasn't a fluke." It was a gut punch. He also rationalized that while my review was positive, I had some flaws I needed to work on, mainly that I didn't work very well in a team atmosphere. I reminded him that I was a team of one, so there wasn't anybody on my team to complain about me. A switch finally flipped in my brain as I realized I'd just gotten majorly screwed and there was no changing the outcome. I told him I was feeling ill and I would be taking some sick days. So I got up and left his office. Coworkers said I looked white as a ghost as I walked out of his office, therefore they knew something was wrong. I forwarded my incoming calls to his extension, packed up my important papers in case I decided to never come back, and then headed to my apartment in a complete rage. I called my family and told them I needed to come home for some much-deserved vacation, so after drinking myself senseless for 48 hours and forwarding all my calls to his voicemail, I called in to work the following Monday and told my boss I'd be taking a vacation week. He was pretty angry about the short notice as he had been dealing with my irate clients contacting him about their problems since I couldn't be reached and he didn't have much of a clue about how to handle the paperwork necessary to do so. So the other associates were now being called in to help my handled workload. Or my apologies, help handle my workload. I flew home and made a few calls to a few people I'd worked with, hoping for some job leads. I managed to grab a lunch with an old associate who had left the firm, and he gave me some ideas and contacts, so I spent the rest of my vacation looking for a new job. I knew the timing sucked, and I was out of options, so I went back to my job the following week. First day back, I looked at my HR data and realized that I still had 11 weeks of vacation to use that year, plus a few more weeks of sick leave. Around that time, there was a company-wide conference call to celebrate a big company milestone. I think the firm was 125 years old, but I really didn't care anymore. To celebrate this big anniversary, we were told we'd be getting an extra week of vacation that year, meaning once again I had 3 months of vacation in my account. As a high performer, I was also selected to spend a few weeks in New York during the summer and fall for some management training. That meant additional time out of the office. The next month was a blur of looking at different vacation options for me to take that year. I had accrued a lot of hotel/rental car points and frequent flyer miles during the past year of traveling around, so I spent my days in the office doing as little client work as I could get away with, while spending the rest of my time on the phone with the frequent flyer/hotel points customer service reps, trying to squeeze in as much vacation out of my miles and points I could. By the end of May, I submitted my vacation requests, which detailed how I was going to take 3 months of vacation in the 7 remaining months of the year. I submitted the forms to HR, and within a day my boss called me in to discuss my schedule, as he realized I was basically going to be gone for almost 2 weeks out of every month for the rest of the year. I was wrapping my vacations around federal and bank holidays whenever I could manage it. He told me he was rejecting my vacation schedule since there wasn't anybody to cover my clients in my absence. I asked him to call the HR rep into his office to have his stance officially on record. He objected, but I said I wouldn't discuss such matters without an HR rep present. HR was called in, and my boss told HR he was rejecting my vacation schedule, but HR responded that I was legally entitled to take the vacation days, so he couldn't reject the request. I also told him that henceforth, I wouldn't be handling any of my customers from my personal cell phone if I was out of the office, so I'd be forwarding my work to his phone when I was on vacation or doing business development trips. Also, I told him I was going to Europe on 2 different trips and would be unable to be contacted since I didn't have a company issued cell phone. He was pissed, but knew that unless he promoted me to director and issued me a cell phone, he couldn't do anything about my new stance. After that, I only did business development in areas I liked to travel to, and more importantly, vacation. Until that point, I had always said yes to any meeting in backwater locations if it represented a chance to land a new client. Having learned my lesson the hard way, I didn't want any new clients to begin with, and certainly none living in areas I didn't like to visit. Trips to Florida became common. If I was traveling, I would typically spend Monday to Wednesday making very infrequent sales calls. Most of my schedule was falsified with fake prospects so I could spend afternoons playing golf or hanging out at hotel pools trolling for women of my age. Then I would take off Thursday and Friday with vacation/sick days so I could hang out and have fun using hotel points to extend my stays for free. Since I was still underpaid, I ate cheaply and learned to squeeze as much out of my trips for the last amount of money I could manage, all while still having fun. My boss was now irate with all the customer calls coming to him, but he refused to hire an assistant for me, so I kept forwarding my line to his when I was out of office. Whenever I was back in the office, pretty infrequent at this point, he would routinely lambaste me with verbal warnings about poor performance reviews, but I would just shrug my shoulders and tell him maybe he was right not to promote me to director since I was such a disappointment. He was also pissed because he'd been commended for having such a high-producing office that year, mostly courtesy of my efforts. Now he was going to get a lot of heat from New York that his new client numbers were down. Since I had frequent flyer miles and hotel points, but not a lot of money, I backpacked through Europe on 2 different 2-week trips that summer and also took a number of vacations back home, diligently following up on job leads in the West Coast that I had cultivated whenever I was in the office. By October, I started to firm up some conversations with a prospective employer back in California and finally received a concrete job offer in mid-November. I waited until December 15th to inform my boss that I was quitting the firm and told him I would be using my 2 remaining weeks of vacation/sick leave so that my resignation was effective immediately. He was surprised that I didn't wait until late April to leave, but I laughed, telling him I knew he was going to screw me on my bonus anyway, so that money wasn't worth waiting around for. He then asked me to stay through the end of January in order to give him enough time to hire and train an assistant or replacement to handle my clients. I simply refused, noting that Jeremy had quit 20 months before, so he had plenty of time to prepare for this eventually. As I was packing up my office and informing coworkers about my departure, I got a knock on my office door from the HR rep as he wanted to conduct an exit interview. He closed the door and I aired out all of my dirty laundry. I told the HR that the firm had lost me when my boss screwed me out of my bonus, repeating the story that there wasn't any money in the budget. The HR counterpart shook his head and laughed at my boss's stupidity, noting that since Jeremy had been an employee at the beginning of the year I had arrived, his salary and bonus was actually in the budget for the whole year. As such, my boss could have allocated the money that he would have paid Jeremy to my bonus, which probably would have kept me reasonably happy, but instead he decided to screw me over. I moved back to California that week and started the new job the first week of January. 3 months into my new job, I got a call from a coworker at my previous firm. He called me to tell me that after I left, HR from the head office in New York came down early in the new year to interview my former coworkers. Apparently, my sudden departure had raised some eyebrows in New York as they viewed me as a rising star, and questions were asked on why I left so abruptly. Apparently, other employees in my office had also gotten screwed in various ways. Lots of client development meal expenses were rejected for being too expensive by the guy who was routinely billing his meals with friends to the firm. So after listing all the complaints, New York management decided to make a change years before he was due to be rotated back to Europe. Since he was related to a guy on the board, they couldn't fire him, so they reassigned my old boss to some backwater farm town. I couldn't pronounce the town, but was told it was the kind of place that doesn't provide perks like allowances for housing, accounts for expensive steak restaurants, or a new Mercedes. I started my own company 5 years back and it worked out pretty well. Even though I got screwed 25 years ago, I always think about the experience fondly, as I probably would have worked for a company like that my entire life had I not been shown how companies and bosses will generally screw you over if given half a chance. It was eye opening and put me on a path to eventually start my own firm, so for that I'm forever grateful. I always think about that situation around New Year's to remind myself of how far I've come and how to not treat my employees. Hopefully, some of you can benefit from my experience without all of the drama I went through. Happy New Year! Oh my goodness! There you have it, folks. The end of the final epic. I know it was kind of a long one, but was definitely worth it as I think it was the juiciest, meatiest story we had to offer today. As always, if you liked these stories and would like to hear some more, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe and make sure you got notifications turned on. That way you could stay up to date with all the latest and greatest we have here on the channel. My name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to seeing you guys in tomorrow's video.